Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be here with you. It's a privilege to co-present with John Windhausen. John is a good friend and does some great things for us. I'm looking forward to hearing from him. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what we're seeing here in the state of Utah as far as expanding and improving and trying to help improve the educational opportunities for our students, and also at the same time to help with the telehealth that's now part of our operation. I just want you to know I'm going to walk you down memory lane a little bit and show you a little bit of the evolution of where we've been to where we are now. I predate the internet. I wasn't there with Al Gore when he invented it, but I was in the classroom as an elementary teacher, teaching 6th grade in my hometown of Garland, Utah. And I remember the day when the principal came into the classroom and he said, I've got a surprise for you. And he says, come out, I want to show you. So I went outside the classroom, and on a cart there he had 3 of these, the old teacher's pet. And I had never touched a computer before in my life. And he said, we got a donor that came up with the money, and I ordered these quite a while ago. I didn't tell you about them, but I have 3 of these. I want you to put them in the back of your classroom. I want you to teach students how to use them. Do any of you remember the teacher's pet? Okay, 2 old guys like me, you know. 3, okay, 3 of you. You had a cassette player. Some of you in this room maybe don't even know what cassettes were, but you had a cassette player on the side there, and you'd put it in there and you'd push play, and it would scroll through the tape, and it would find the program that you wanted, and then the students could actually sit down in front of this computer and do stuff. It was just so, I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. And I want to show you the quality of what we had. Isn't that fantastic? You know, that's just really neat. This is going on an adventure or something like that. But I was just so excited that I had in my classroom the capabilities of my students to touch a computer and to do stuff. Well, you know, it wasn't very much longer when not only could I have that program in that computer, but we had a dial-up system that we could actually go outside of the 4 walls of the classroom, and we could bring information into the classroom. Anybody remember those days? That was exciting. That was really neat. And then I saw us change to the next level and go with the T1 line. I remember when the T1s came in. I mean, that was the Cadillac of connectivity. We'd hit Nirvana. I just was so excited about that. I couldn't believe it. Well, let me share with you where we've evolved from the T1 line until where we are right now. I'm going to click on this, and it should be, yeah, it's going to take me right to our website. This actually shows the connectivity that we have at UETN for school districts. Down at the bottom, it lists the various school districts: Alpine, Box Elder, Jordan, Juab, Park City, etc. All of the school districts. There's also a column for charter schools. Let me bring that down a little bit. But for the charter schools, let's see what kind of connectivity we have in Utah. We have, if you see at the top, 116 charter schools. 3 of them are special purpose schools. I'm not sure what particularly kind of special purpose schools they are. But of those charter schools, 24 of them have 100 meg of fiber connectivity. That's nowhere near sufficient. We're right now in the process of looking at that and upgrading their connectivity. You have 89 that have 1 gig of connectivity into a charter school. That's what our charter schools look like. Let's take a look over here at Nebo District. Nebo's here in Utah County. Nebo District has 1 special purpose school. That may be a preschool, it may be a Head Start program. They have 40 schools that have 1 gig of connectivity. They have 2 schools, that'd be the 2 high schools, that have 2 gigs of connectivity, and then they have a 10 gig, which is their district office. Let's go look at this one over here. You have Canyons District has one special purpose school. They have 48 of their schools, 2 gig of connectivity, and then they have their district office and a data center that has 10 gig of connectivity. And then look at Davis. Davis has two schools, or two sites with 1 gig. They have 88 sites with 2 gig of connectivity, and 2, which would be their district office and their data warehouse, with 10 gigs of connectivity. So we've gone all the way from that dial-up, even pre-dial-up when we didn't have any connection, to that kind of connectivity. And I think the question is what's really driving that demand? Now, how do I get out of this? Just shut that quick. Okay. Whoops. Go back. There we go. Well, there are 4 things that I look at. Wanting access, the demand for access to information, to bring that information into the classroom, the way that we've changed instruction and engagement of students, a need to look for efficiencies and do things more cost effectively, and then looking at just the growth and the enhanced technologies that we're seeing. So let's take these each at a time. Access, I was formerly the superintendent of Park City School District, and it was a very unique school district where we had, my first week on the job, we opened the school year up the last week of August. I had a group of parents come in and talk to me, and they said, middle of September, we're going to come in, we're going to check our students out, and we're going to take them down to South America for competition with ski racing. And we went over to the high school to let the teachers know, and they told us, we're sorry, but you're going to have to check your kids out. Go down there, you worry about their education. When you get done 60 days later, bring them back, re-enroll them in the school, and we hope you've done a good job while you've been gone. And they said, we don't like that. And I said, well, I don't like that either, because the technology was there that we could somehow keep those students connected, and they wanted to be. So, we had a district where even preschoolers started with into the Olympic training types of programs, and they were missing a lot of school, but they wanted to be connected to the school district. They didn't want to go to a private school. They didn't want to be homeschooled. They wanted to be part of the system. I also had a young lady that was going to Nashville on a regular basis to be a country western singer. She would go, and she'd spend about a month at a time in recording sessions. I had a young lady in the district that she would go to Florida for up to 60 to 90 days at a time to train her horse to do equestrian competitions and jumping competitions. We had a young man who went to California on a regular basis as a race car driver. We had students that would go to the doctor or to the dentist, and they'd miss school for various reasons, and they wanted to be able to still be connected to the school system. And sometimes you have a student that gets an injury, or they're sick and they're homebound for any particular length of time. Sometimes you just have families that tell you, hey, we're going on vacation. We're going to be gone, somewhere, and we want... Yeah, Brad, I knew you'd pick up on that. Anyway, they just said, our kids do want to stay connected, but we're going to be gone for a while. So what is it you do? And then you have within the classroom itself, those students want to learn. They're looking for things. They're wanting to be actively engaged. And what can we do to help them with that? Looking at the way we've changed instruction and engagement of students. It used to be stand up in front of the group and just lecture and hope that those students grasp the concept. And I just remember how frustrated I would be when teachers would say, I taught them. It's not my fault they didn't get it. I taught them the material. Well, that wasn't a very effective way of teaching. So we started moving towards small groups. We started also now looking at project-based instruction. We have groups that now go out and are actively engaged in research. They're out doing water studies and bird counts and doing all kinds of things like that. It frees the teacher up because of the technology to be able to have more time to spend with students on a one-to-one basis. And you actually get right down, through the use of technology, you get right down to the level where students are able to work independently and have an individualized instructional program to meet their needs. And then, of course, we're using interactive video conferencing to be able to accommodate students at multiple locations. You go down to the Four Corners area, you go down to Lake Powell is one example. I was down there visiting the school at one time, and they go through kindergarten through 12th grade down at this Lake Powell school, but they don't have a math teacher at the secondary level. So what they do is they use the IVC, and they go over to Kanab Middle School, and they use one of the teachers there that actually teaches math to those secondary students at Lake Powell. You know, that would be an 8-hour trip to go around the lake and try to get around into that area, but through the use of technology, we're able to get them there. This next one is for me, is very interesting. What is it that we're doing that causes that kind of a reaction with students, that they're so engaged that they're surprised and shocked? I'm not selling this product, but I saw it demoed at the ISTE conference just recently, and I want to share it with you, show you what's happening.
zSpace is the next generation of human-computer interaction. As a desktop virtual reality platform, zSpace adds a new dimension to the user's experience. With our head-tracked eyewear and hand-tracked stylus, you can see and interact with virtual objects on zSpace as if they were real objects in front of you.
You can get a lot more done in your 42-minute period. Setting up some of these labs would be impossible in those kind of time frames, but you can walk into zSpace and have the thing saved for the students all ready to go.
When you're looking at a model in a regular anatomy course, you can't see the inside of a structure, but with zSpace you have the ability to actually look into a structure.
You can kind of pick and choose what you want to focus on.
If you want to just look at muscles, you can. If you want to look at muscles and nerves, you can.
A fabulous teaching tool and a way to get involved learning in a way that cannot ever be done in another way.
Already showing success in the hands of students, educators, researchers, designers and professionals around the world, the possibilities are infinite. Imagine what you can do with zSpace.
To me, that was incredible when I had the opportunity to use that and actually have that heart sitting right there floating in the air in front of me and being able to take it apart and look at the inside workings of the human heart. It was just incredible. So technology has gone from that green screen to, it's hard to tell if it's real or if it's animation. And it's a virtual 3D interactive. The next area I mentioned, efficiencies. You know, so I just put a list here of things that are school districts, higher ed institutions are looking at to have economies of scale. You know, digital content. They're no longer ordering the hardbound textbooks, but they're going with digital content, web-based, open education resources, online tools, learning management systems. Looking for filtering solutions, cloud storage, data backup recovery, you know, whatever they can do to see some efficiencies there. It continues to grow. The demand grows. I think it's interesting to look at the University of Utah and see what it is that they're doing. You know, they actually have a satellite campus in South Korea now. Students can take online courses and they actually have face-to-face courses there as well, but they can get University of Utah credit and degrees from the University of Utah, even though they're in South Korea. They also have in their nursing program students that are taking courses from multiple states. I think there are at least 7 states that are represented with our current cohort group, all the way up to Alaska. And these are nursing students that live in, and most of them in remote areas, but yet they'll be able to receive their licensure and be able to enhance their careers through the use of technology. University of Utah, or excuse me, UVU, Utah Valley University, has down in, where is this? Right here. It's where? Right here, in Orem. Well, UVU's here in Orem, but they actually have a classroom, at Capitol Reef, that's what it is, down at Capitol Reef. You can imagine the logistical nightmare that it took to get connectivity at that national park. But working with our telcos, we were able to do that. And so students actually go there, they're able to do their research, do a lot of different things, and right there in the Capitol Reef National Park. Students are using more and more social media. That's increasing the demand for bandwidth. Using multiple devices, it's no longer a 3-to-1 or a 1-to-1 initiative. You've got your smartphone, you have your laptop, you have your iPad, maybe you have a watch. Who knows what you have? It's getting up to be almost a 5-to-1 demand. PBS, we are working on a pilot project. They're looking at no longer broadcasting over the airwaves, but using the backbone and using the internet for delivery right to the homes. Internet of Things, everything's becoming connected. My fridge can tell me when I need to buy more milk. It's just crazy because it knows that it's not. I don't know how it senses it, but it tells me when it's time to go out and buy some more milk. Things like that. School districts, everything's automated. Sprinklers, the HVAC system, security cameras, all of that. Walmart. I don't know why or how, but we actually have the gun registration site flows over our network. So if we ever have an outage of any kind, we start getting phone calls from Walmart saying, when are you going to be up and running? Because we got to do a background check on this guy that wants to buy a gun. I thought that was, I don't know why or how, but that's the truth. The Highway Patrol, they use our Wi-Fi hotspots, as you've seen them with their computers in their patrol cars, and as they're driving around, they're accessing things through our network. And then we have our teachers. Our teachers are becoming much more tech savvy. I don't know if you can read that, but teacher sending out a text to the student and he's saying, "Isn't this great? Text me your homework." So they're utilizing technology more and more. So the next question then is what about telehealth? What's the idea on how we're going to continue to improve telehealth? Well, this past year, it wasn't last session, but the session before, the legislature combined the Utah Telehealth Network with the Utah Education Network. We were the Utah Education Network. Now telehealth is under our umbrella. And so the idea really is, how do we get it from the source of telehealth providing services right down to the individual in the home, and how do we get them connected? Well, it's no different than what we're doing for the schools. The source of information right down to the individual student. That's what we are now working on, is how do we provide services to those individuals that can't drive to a hospital, that can't drive the hundreds of miles here to Salt Lake to see a surgeon for some reason. Or they've had surgery, they're back in their home, and now they need to be monitored. And that can all be done through the use of technology. So just a lot of things happening. It's just a pleasure to be part of this. And it's going to be interesting to see in the short time, like I said, going from a teacher's pet computer in the classroom to what we see now, to virtual learning, telehealth services and all of that. It's just an amazing ride. So anyway, thank you. mine, right?
So thanks so much, Ray. And John, if you want to come and start setting up, that would be great. So our next speaker, is going to be John Windhausen. Came all the way from Washington, D.C., so we're really happy to have him here. He's the Executive Director at Schools, Health, and Libraries Broadband Coalition, or Shelby. He has a consulting practice,
Telepoli.
Consulting, which he opened in 2004. Prior to this, John served for 5 years as president of the Association for Local Telecommunications Services. From 1987 to 1996, he served as counsel and senior counsel to the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee, where he helped draft the Telecommunications Act of 1996. He began his career at the FCC as a staff attorney in 1984. So, thanks so much.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for your attention, and I share the privilege. It's a great privilege to follow Ray Timothy, one of the leaders in the country responsible for deploying one of these really valuable research and education networks in the state of Utah. Not every state has a network like Utah has here, so you're really lucky to have this kind of capability here. And a lot of the, so I was going to make a similar point, Ray, to the one that you made about the gun registration. A lot of times these research and education networks are operating behind the scenes. People really don't always know that their traffic is being used and being run over these networks, but they're enormously valuable, and particularly because they enable so much to be done with schools and health and libraries and anchor institutions generally, that they really provide a tremendous value and service. So Utah's very lucky to have Ray. So as was mentioned, I'm head of the Schools, Health, and Libraries Broadband Coalition. I know that's a mouthful, so we shorten it to call ourselves the Shelby Coalition. We're based in Washington, D.C., but we have members all across the country. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, just so you have a sense of who we are. And our mission, as it says here, is to promote open, affordable, high-capacity broadband for community anchor institutions and their communities. And the end portion of that is equally important, and their communities. So we're about getting high-capacity broadband to the institution, but that's not the end of the journey. Our mission is to expand from the school, from the hospital or the healthcare provider, from the library out into the residential community, into the business beyond that, in that neighborhood. So we are a voice for anchor institutions in Washington, D.C. What we try to do is learn from what you are doing in the real world and the experiences that you're having, the successes and the challenges that you're facing, and bring those lessons that we learned to Washington to help to inform policymakers about how they can integrate these lessons into developing new policies. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in this presentation, but also our time has been a little compressed for this session. Pleased to say I'll also be on the plenary session later on this afternoon, so things I don't get to here, I'll have a chance to talk about a little bit more this afternoon. But these are some of the topics that I plan to cover today. But I really want to focus, starting off on this slide. This provides some of the examples of innovative things that schools, health, and libraries are doing around the country. Ray talked a lot about the specific uses of these broadband services and the applications. I think ultimately the most critical point is that it's not just about the technology. And we've seen many examples where schools rush in to adopt the latest technology and it doesn't work, and it's a failure. And in fact, if you look at what happened in Los Angeles and their effort to roll out a one-to-one computing initiative a couple of years ago, Los Angeles did just about everything wrong that you can do. They rushed through that project to sign contracts with Apple for the distribution of tablets to every student in the Los Angeles school district without doing enough testing, they didn't provide enough teacher training and professional development, so the equipment showed up and the teachers didn't know what to do with it, how to integrate it into their classrooms to make it really valuable. The software that was provided on the devices wasn't tested, wasn't up to speed. Now there are some allegations that maybe there was some bias in the bidding process, so now the Department of Justice is looking at that contract. Everything LA did, that story is what not to do. But there are several examples out there of organizations, cities, school districts that are doing really fabulous things with this technology and really making it work. I think it started in Mooresville, North Carolina, where they adopted one of the nation's first one-to-one initiatives, and with a school district there that received commendation from President Obama when he announced his Connect Ed initiative. And now that has spread. The best example I know of is in Houston, Texas. I think it's the 7th largest school district in the country. And they have done things really the right way, as far as I can tell. They've implemented a Power Up initiative that is across the board. It's very collaborative, so it's interesting. It was led by the IT directors within the Houston School District, but they also included 6 or 7 different city departments that they knew were also going to have input into making this successful. So it wasn't IT driven or IT commanded, but integrated professional development, integrated a lot of the after-school activities so that kids and students and extracurricular activities were brought into the planning. They rolled it out in stages, in certain trials. A couple of really interesting things about Houston that make it interesting to me, they reversed the model. So they've purchased and owned their own fiber networks. And this is pretty unusual. Usually most school districts are leasing fiber through the E-rate program, but in this case they decided that it was more cost-effective to own and run their own dark fiber networks connecting all the schools, and that was a more cost-effective way of delivering the service. And then the other flip side is they leased the equipment. They decided that actually tablets were not the way to go because it didn't have a keyboard that was adequate for the students to learn and really be able to use the tablets for composing homework assignments. So they leased laptop computers, and they found that to be more educationally stimulating and more consistent with what the teachers were trying to accomplish in the classroom. So they've gone about it in a different kind of model in both ways. Usually you lease the fiber and you own your equipment, and Houston did it exactly the opposite way, which goes to show that you need to do some planning and integrate and think a little bit outside the box in order to achieve your educational objectives, not your technology objectives. In Kent, Washington has another example of some innovation by the schools, where the school is realizing that so many of their low-income students don't have broadband at home, and particularly the housing projects. So the school itself set up kiosks, wireless Wi-Fi kiosks, inside the housing projects, so that kids, when they leave school, they don't suffer that homework gap that a lot of kids do. If they don't have broadband at home, they can't complete their school assignments. They have a place to go to inside the housing project. And it wasn't the housing project that set that up, it was the school district. Similarly, in Albemarle County, Virginia, the school district there set up its own Wi-Fi network extending out through the town, but then realized that they needed to do more than that because it's such a rural county in southwestern Virginia. They realized the kids needed to have cellular signals to the home that weren't getting them. So the school system itself deployed an LTE wireless network throughout the school district to be able to allow kids in homes to be able to access and complete their school assignments. So they tried to get a commercial wireless company, a regular traditional cellular company, to provide that service. Nobody found it economic to do so, so the school decided to take it on its own. Libraries are doing some innovative things as well. I think we've heard a lot about maker spaces in libraries, spaces set aside in the libraries where you give the kids the ability to be entrepreneurs and develop their own technology, their own computer programming. Now this maker spaces, of course, requires more bandwidth. Libraries also are increasingly transitioning into becoming warehouses, stores of digital information. And so they need additional bandwidth than they've ever had before. But unfortunately, a lot of schools and libraries around the country just don't yet have the bandwidth that they need in order to accommodate all of these great technologies and these really innovative uses. So that's the problem that we are trying to be involved in planning, but you need to have teacher training and library training to really accommodate these technologies. I was at a session last week in DC when Chicago Mayor Emanuel came and spoke, and he said, if you don't have teacher training and library training, then all of this IT equipment becomes furniture. It just becomes sitting in the classroom. You don't know how to use it. You need to accompany it with professional development. But interestingly, Mayor Emanuel also said that the E-rate program has been so successful that it's worked. He said this several times, it's worked. In Chicago, we should expand the E-rate program in order to expand its capabilities and develop new programs that the E-rate program can help to benefit. So there are a lot of exciting developments happening in the education and library world that make this technology really a fascinating developments, but it has to be done carefully and it has to be done thoughtfully. And that's what we are trying to do with a number of our advocacy issues that we take on in Washington, D.C. So I'm not going to have time to go through all of these E-rate developments, but obviously the E-rate successes that we achieved last year were tremendous. We got an additional $1.5 billion added into the E-rate program every single year. And that is just great because the E-rate program has been underfunded for years and years. There's been about twice as much applicant demand as there has been money available. Now the FCC has been able to address that need, a good portion of that need. The Shelby Coalition was one of the organizations that submitted a cost study to the FCC saying if you really want schools and libraries to have a fiber-based technology and connections, you really need to make more money available. So we put a cost, and the FCC asked us, well, how much will that cost? So that we said, that's a good question. We went out and commissioned a cost study to be done and submitted for the record. That was one of 2 studies that were submitted to the FCC that the FCC used to justify this additional funding. But not only the funding, although that is the kind of most visible change the FCC made, they also made some important changes to the fiber rules. Now an applicant has a longer period of time to pay back the costs of that fiber installation. They changed the amortization rules. They also allowed the electronics for dark fiber to be made available and eligible for E-rate support. They also poured a lot more applicant money available for Wi-Fi, for internal connections inside the schools and libraries. So we're now beginning to see some of the fruits of this activity. The Wi-Fi purchases are much stronger than they were before. The terminology was changed from priority 2 to category 2 so that it conveys the notion that yes, internal connections are now a priority, are just as much of a priority as the external connections. The fiber-based rules are taking effect next year. So there hasn't been much activity yet with school districts and libraries deploying their own fiber, but we're very hopeful that that will come in the next year or 2. In fact, the FCC in its USAC training, USAC is the administrative agency that enforces the E-rate program. They're going around doing training sessions around the country. They're also adding to those training sessions a specific training done by Joe Fredoso, one of Ray's former colleagues. Joe used to head up MCNC, the Research and Education Network in North Carolina. He left, the FCC hired Joe to help facilitate the training, and so they're doing extra workshops after these E-rate training sessions on how schools and libraries can learn to deploy their own fiber networks. And Joe told me last week that they're tracking about 70 or 80 different school and library systems that are now beginning to explore how they can deploy their own fiber networks and have their destiny in their hands and under their control. And that could facilitate a lot more of these innovations that we're beginning to see. So I'm going to have to wrap up here quickly and won't be able to get to all the slides that I had prepared, but I did want to note one thing very important. Ray talked about the importance of health and how Utah Education Network is now the Utah Education and Telehealth Network. And the integration of education and health is a really important development going forward. These can be shared networks. A lot of times the health community tends to think they need their own special network because of HIPAA rules and because of technology. That is not the case. The health networks can ride on the same fiber cables as the education networks, the library networks, and in fact, it's much more efficient to allow that kind of sharing. So the FCC has a Healthcare Connect Fund that is intended to be used to help deploy health networks in rural areas. To be honest, it has not been working all that well. $400 million has been allocated for that program. The FCC's only been able to give away about half of that money. And that's because the application rules are so difficult. The match has been too difficult. The Shelby Coalition is going to be filing a petition next month where we're going to be asking the FCC to change the rules and loosen up the rules to allow more allow more money to flow to help build out these networks in rural health, to achieve greater connectivity for health clinics in these rural areas. So stay tuned for that. It's a really important initiative that we have going. We appreciate Ray's support and the Utah Education and Telehealth Network support for this petition. We're working with California and Colorado and Montana and New England as well on this petition. So it's another example of what we are doing in order to try to promote greater innovation and broadband connectivity for anchor institutions around the country. And with that, I'll stop for now and let us get back to the next session. But I appreciate your attention and look forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you.